With great honor, I would like to welcome you all to the Day 2 of 15th South Asia Economic Summit, SAES XV, Unleashing an Equitable Green Transformation in South Asia, here in beautiful Kathmandu. Since this morning, we have been gathered over here in discussing on different topics. So now, immediately after lunch, we have another interesting parallel session on the topic Inequality and Justice in an Era of Climate Change. Without further delay, I would like to welcome our esteemed moderator and panelists to the stage for another enlightening session. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our moderator, Mr. John Samuel. He is Regional Director of Oxfam in Asia. Mr. Prakash Kafle, Thematic Lead, Resilience and Climate Justice, including Humanitarian, Oxfam in Nepal, as our presenter for today. And I would also like to call our panelists to the stage. Dr. Nityananda, Director, Council for Social Development, India. Professor Mohammad Saidul Haq, South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance, SIPG, North-South University, and former Foreign Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of Bangladesh. Ms. Saima William, Program Lead for Climate Action, Center for Peace and Development Initiatives, CPDI, Pakistan. Ms. Diksha Singh, Program Coordinator, Southi Nepal. Before I hand over the session to our moderator, I encourage each of you to engage actively in the discussions afterwards as well, to all the participants. Thank you once again for being here. I now invite our moderator to take the stage and guide us through this enlightening session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon to everyone. So we are beginning this panel discussion on inequality and justice in the era of climate change. As we know, climate change, the causes and consequences of climate change affect the marginalized communities much more, women much more, whether it is energy transition, whether it's overconsumption, and, you know, inequality affects in the consumption of water, the consumption of all the natural resources, as well as in terms of the consequences of climate change. Today, we have 5 panelists. So let me first say the design of the program. First, we will have Prakash Kafle, who will give a general presentation on this. Prakash Kafle is an MPhil in Natural Resource Management, and he is currently working as a thematic lead for resilience, climate justice in Oxfam, Nepal. He brings almost 2 decades of experience on food security and rural resilient livelihood, climate change and disaster risk reduction and community mobilization. So Prakash Kafle is actually a very active practitioner addressing some of these issues on the grounds. And after his general presentation, he will speak around 15 minutes. Each panelist will have 10 minutes. After 8 minutes, you look at there and we will give an early warning. So after we finish all the sessions, we will have an open discussion, an open panel. So we'll have those who are in on the floor to raise questions or to give inputs, and then I'll ask panelists to give their input to those specific questions towards the second half. So, these sessions will remain almost till 2:45. We are slightly late, but that will be the format. After the presentations only, we'll have sort of an open discussion. With that, let me invite Prakash Kafle for the presentation.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. Good afternoon and namaste, everyone. I am making a presentation on inequality and injustice in the face of climate change. Basically, my argument is that, please, next slide, please. Oh, sorry. I am sorry. I have. Could you please help me? Oh, it's back. Okay, thank you. My argument is that inequality and injustices have further worsened the climate change impact. Climate change is a natural, or maybe we can attribute it to anthropometric factors as well, but it does not have equal impact on all level, on all sector, on all class of the society. So the triggering factor there is the inequality and injustices. So this is my basic argument, how climate change has impacted differently to different group of people. So this has a connotations with geographical location, of financial, socioeconomic aspects. And one of the things that is very interesting is that these vulnerabilities to the impact of climate change increase when economic inequality intersects with inequalities of power, inequality such as gender, ethnicity, and age. So this is basically how vulnerabilities how inequalities exacerbate the vulnerability. So this is also linked with the socioeconomic factors, gender, age, location, these things. So we have these things that women, particularly those with low socioeconomic status, tend to have less access to relief and assistance, lower survival rates following climate-related disasters, and increased care responsibilities. So this is an argument that I want to present, that the climate change has burden additional care responsibilities on women. So that is one example. And women also face greater crisis from the effects of the heat stress, as well as risks related to the maternal and child health. So heat stress has a more impact on women's health as compared to other genders. And similarly, we have this global inequality. Climate crisis is increasingly global inequality, wealth inequalities. Inequalities between nations is 25% higher than it used to have been without impact of climate breakdown. So Oxfam's this inequality report has found that this is the wealth inequalities is also created by climate crisis. I will go to the next thing. This also, if you see this inequalities and consumption, inequality-driven consumption creating climate crisis. So inequalities among this society, within the class, caste, geography, political locations have created a climate crisis. So the wealthiest 1% of the world's population emit more than twice the amount of greenhouse gas emissions is the poorest 50%. So this is the inequality statement, that wealthier person creating more climate emissions. So the next thing is that our projection by SEI and Oxfam revealed that in 2030, the per capita consumption emissions of the old super rich are said to be over 22 times greater than the level compatible with the target to keep the global warming below 1.5 degrees centigrade. And by contrast, the emission of the poorest half of the global population are said to remain 1/5 of the 1.5 degrees centigrade compatible level. So Oxfam has done a study around inequalities and wealth and climate. So these are all data that proves that wealth inequalities, wealth distributions has impacted on climate crisis. So globalization further exacerbated the status by creating income disparity. Though there are some school of thoughts that globalization has also have some positive impact on economy, but we argue that, in Oxfam we argue that it has further exacerbated the status quo by creating income disparity accumulating wealth of those who have excess, manipulating environmental and regulatory laws. So those who have wealth, our argument is that those who have wealth, they can manipulate environmental laws, climate laws, and regulation in favor of them. So this is the power and inequality driven things. It is not only the science or only the anthropometric things, it is more than that. It is a power, it is inequalities, it is injustices that climate crisis has happened. Oh, I'm really getting trouble with this. So this is the climate finance. So because we are also discussing, maybe tomorrow we have a designated session on climate finance. So even though the reality is that what is the climate finance? If you take a case of Nepal, the climate finance budget has generally increased with increase in expenditure as well. But look, here is inequality as well. The exception is province and local government. Where it should be reached, where there is a dire need, where there is a requirement, the climate finance at province and local level is decreased. So this is also an equality, examples of equalities. So the next thing is that we also show in case of Nepal is that the amount of loans has been increased every year. The climate, because that is not a very justice for us to receive the loan in the name of climate crisis or climate change adaptations. Contribution of loan for the total climate budget was 14.7% in fiscal year of 2017-18, but that was increased to 18.3% in 2021-2025. So the proportion is increasing. Climate loan proportion is increasing. The third thing is that although majority of donors adaptation projects report gender as a core targets, 61% of adaptation finance does not address gender equality, indicating that many large adaptation projects lack a gender equality sensitivity or the focus. So this has also been impacted on our climate crisis. Majority of available climate funding is conditional, and the country has limited technical capacity in meeting strict compliances. I will go to the next. So what is the solution then? How, then this is the scenario that inequality, injustices, loans, gender is not considered. So what is the solution? The solution that we should have an inclusive climate actions. So this will have two purposes. One, it will reduce the climate effect, climate change, impact of climate change on the most vulnerable communities. If we include them, if you give a conducive environment, policy frameworks, policy acts or guidelines, if we include those vulnerable people, it improves the inclusion, and inclusion can reduce the inequality. This is our arguments. So we also ensure that this inclusive climatic action should also ensure the benefits and burdens of the climate actions are equitably distributed. It is not that those who cannot afford it should be burdened with this argument, this benefit. So this should be equally distributed. And I prefer to say the word co-creation. That means we should involve science, the think tank, the traditional, our practices, the communities, the national, international actors in creating policy. So this should be co-created. That means in a way, if you co-create, that will be more inclusive. So that is our second argument. So understanding local needs that climate action should meet and address. That means it should not be very like bringing impact in 5 years or 6 years is not what we are looking. We also need some immediate action, because that is a crisis. Climate crisis, for example, is disaster. Climate-induced disaster has left many people without houses, without food. So we also need that immediate actions to recover from those type of trauma, those type of crises. But we also need some long-term, some medium-term actions that also cover, that also go to the root causes of those things and make these things not happen in the coming days. We should engage in this policy debate. We should engage local communities, not as a recipient, but as a development partner, so that their needs, their interests, their knowledge Even I was reading that the UNFCCC has also acknowledged the rich knowledge, traditional and indigenous knowledge on climate change adaptations. So in line with that recognitions, we should also consider this, the knowledge of the local people have in adaptation, in mitigations, and in supporting to others. So this should also be included in the climate change debate, climate change policy formulations, climate change act formulation. So this should be one of the solutions that we are proposing. We have to regularly analyze the distributed impacts of proposed climate actions. That means a system should be there to review the policy impact, to review the challenges, to review the advantage. It should not be like that we make the policy in year one, and for the 5 or 6 years we do not look after it, we do not analyze it. So that will not really work, because climate change, the issue itself, the climate is changing very rapidly. So this should be there as a solution. We should design equitable climate actions that respond to the needs and priorities and ensure benefits are distributed fairly. I also said this in the past in the above points, and I also reiterate here that the benefits and burdens should be shared equitably, and we have to monitor and evaluate inclusivity in the cities or in the localities climate actions. I think how we can do within South Asia. For example, this is one of the highly populated area. Nepal, Bangladesh, other neighboring countries, we are impacted very badly climate change. But still, we can do as a single entity. We can do that within South Asia. We can share data. We do not have a. For example, we are working in one of our transboundary projects in the western part of Nepal on Mahakali River basins. We have challenges in receiving data from the Indian counterpart, so that we can communicate with our communities. And they are also receiving data, not receiving data from our weather stations. So this is one of the challenges. We are not better prepared in the flood there. So this is one area that we can share data among ourselves, so better prepare, better adapt with the climate change impact. Upstream, downstream, heat and cold waves data. So these are one of the areas that we can work together. We also have two specific things that we can monitor and reporting climate variables, especially this snowfall and glacier. This is one of the areas that we can, because these are our water towers. All of our water systems is based on this glaciers and snowfalls and mountains. So we also have to focus there as well. So this is the second area we can do that. And also the third thing is that we have to, there is an opportunity for us to share adaptive and or best practices on farming. Because agriculture is our mainstay in all of the South Asia. We are basically a farming community. So if you share our knowledge and experiences on climate adaptive practices, on how we can cope up with climate, especially with this heat stress and drought stress, flooding. So this is one of the areas we can do. And we can also do joint study research, even if it is not possible in the government level, maybe CSO can come forward and do this type of joint research and studies, so that can be used as evidence to influence our governments to work together. So this is within the South Asia region, we can do that. So beyond the region as an entity, as a single entity, we can do what we can do is that let's reinvigorate our regional cooperations. Let's work together as a united entity to engage with others. There are challenges. We have been seeing that SAARC is, our regional cooperation is almost a dormant institutions. But let's find out some ways that how we can reinvigorate those type of regional relationships. Let's do some track to diplomacy. I have just get some chances that that does work, that did work in the past. I have some informal chat with the colleagues, so that has some good impact in the past as well. So that we can do as well. People's Forum is a good forum, good platform. We can present ourselves collectively to others. South Asian Forum, we have some institutions, some active institutions, some are also there, so we can reinvigorate them, or we can form a very collective so that we can, this can be one area, one methods that we can engage with others. Evidence collection, advocacy and influencing, collective evidence collection, collective advocacy, collective influencing can be one area that we can do together. And the fifth one I propose is collaborating with like-minded organizations in the north. In the global north, there are organizations, there are peoples who speak in favor of, who support us, who are our friends, who are our allies. We can also collaborate with them. We can work together with them. We can build network and alliances with them, and we can present, we can amplify our voices among others with support of this type of institutions. So this is some of the suggestions that I put here, that how can we raise issue of climate change globally as an one entity. Thank you very much for listening. I am here to respond if you have any questions. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Prakash, for finishing on time and for an excellent presentation, especially focusing on the issue of inclusion, sharing of knowledge, and how women should have a sense of agency to take part in this policy discussions and debate, etc. So I would request Professor Dr. Nitya Nanda, Director of the Council of Social Development of India, to share his perspective. And Dr. Nitya Nanda is the Director of the well-known Indian think tank called Council for Social Development. He earlier worked with TEDI, CUTS International, National Council of Applied Economic Research. He has done his PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University. His areas of interest include international trade, industrialization, energy, and environmental issue. Over to you, Dr. Nityananda. Would be able to go there, or yeah. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Soti and Soti colleagues, for getting me here. Inequality and justice, climate justice, I think those two are very important terms here. Inequality because we are in a situation of inequality. Our incomes, per capita incomes, in all the countries in South Asia is pretty low. Maybe slightly higher in Maldives, but in all other countries pretty low. Our energy consumption in all these countries are also pretty low, apart from Bhutan and Maldives. Slightly they are in a better position. And when your income is low, your energy consumption is low, be sure that your emission is also pretty low. So we are dealing with all these three kind of inequality where we are at the lowest possible level. But when it comes to vulnerability, we are among the highest. So another kind of inequality we are facing. Now we all know that, you are more vulnerable if you are poorer, even in the same country, even in US, even in India, even in Nepal. So one of the most important antidote for climate vulnerability is that you are economically slightly well off. You live in a good house so that cyclone doesn't smash your house. You can manage your income without being whatever your means of production being washed away by climate related disasters. Now that would certainly need that our income has to go up. Now how much income we would have in future? Can we have, say, around 2040 or 50, can we reach the level of, say, US or European countries? My answer would be simply no. Now suppose you can't reach there. India is around $2,500 per capita income. Suppose you want to reach something like $10,000. I would not have higher ambition. And that's ambition for, say, all countries in the region. For, of course, Nepal, would be needing much more efforts because their current income is not even as high as India. So to make that possible, what you need to do? Now, if you go by the development history, you would need that you have to industrialize. Very essential condition for that is that you have to have industry. Now, that would need energy. And if we are operating at a very low level of energy consumption, that is very low. And it is now almost well established that to reach a medium level of, a respectable level of human development, you would need at least 2,000 kilowatt of electricity per annum that you have to use per capita. And if you have to do that, our countries need to consume much more of electricity, especially countries like Bangladesh, even Sri Lanka and all. So all of them need much more electricity to be consumed. Now there are two aspects that need to be considered here. That energy you need at your homes, energy you need to run your personal cars, and energy you need to run your factories. Now these two different kinds of energy consumption are very different in nature. Now if you look at the industrial history of the last, say, 30 years, you will find something very, very stark. Now, most developed countries actually have not increased the industrial production over the last 30 years. In fact, some developed countries in Europe and even US, they had their level of industrial production decline in absolute sense. Germany has been able to maintain. In Japan, it has declined in absolute sense. But what happened to their energy consumption? Their industrial production has gone down, but their energy consumption has not come down to that extent. Why? Because their energy consumption is mostly in houses and running cars, and also leisure travel by airlines. So those are the energy consumption which you can say as lifestyle related energy consumption. Now everybody talks about Chinese energy consumption being high, but still China is not yet a developed country. China is still, you can say, upper middle income country, per capita income around 10,000, and that is the level we would aspire to be in. Now in their case, energy consumption has gone up mostly because of industrial production. Right. So the crux of the story is that if we have to develop, energy consumption will go up, and how will that play out in terms of energy use and emission that occurs due to that. Now, as I said, we cannot be oblivious of the facts that climate change is happening and we are worst affected. We would make best possible efforts, but we are in a dilemma. What kind of dilemma? That two aspects of climate action, one is mitigation, one is adaptation. Now we all know that developed countries or even developing countries, I would not get into that distinction, but the actions we have been taking will not be able to limit, emission level or say temperature rise level within 1.5 degree. So it will be probably 2 degrees centigrade or more of temperature increase. So we know that climate change is happening and climate change will happen, and we will be affected much more. Now given that we have our limited resources, where do we prioritize in South Asia or in other individual countries, developing countries? the balance, maintaining balance between adaptation and mitigation becomes very, very difficult. We cannot ignore adaptation, all kinds of maybe making permanent structure houses for poor people which they cannot afford, that might need government efforts, so even that is part of our adaptation efforts. Now with that, energy consumption will also go up. Both will need some slightly higher level of energy consumption at our homes. Our people have to live with some comfortable environment. We know that most of our people live in, work in outside environment, so they cannot work in AC environment, but maybe they would like to sleep for 8 hours at night, maybe in AC, so that they work in non-AC environment, during daytime. So their home electricity consumption might go up. Now with that, what kind of, arrangements that need to be made? We have to go for our own public transport. We have to reduce our, personal electricity consumption, what in India we call it lifestyle for climate adaptation mitigation. That we will do. But also think about what is the best solution. Given that technology is still emerging, given that we are not sure about the life cycle impact in terms of emission of the climate, of the technologies that we adopt, what do we do? And we thought of depending on technology and finance from developed countries, and we know that that is not going to happen in a significant scale. Just few days back, we had COP in Baku that was pretty, I would say disappointing in terms of results if you talk about climate finance. So we're not going to get much of help. So the inequality of situation and inequality of efforts will continue because we are not going to get much of help. And that's why the CBDR is important, which Paris Agreement virtually had made it irrelevant. But I think we have to still keep that in our mind whenever we talk about our own climate action, mitigation or adaptation. Those will be the important part of our climate action. Thank you.
Thank you very much for keeping the time, Dr. Nitya. And some of the very important points he mentioned is the dichotomy between economic development, energy consumptions, and some of the strategies to adapt, including public transport, technology innovations, etc. So thank you very much for that presentation. Now I would request Professor Shahidul Haq. Professor Shahidul Haq was the Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh from 2013 to 2019. At the moment he teaches, he's a professor at the North-South University, Bangladesh, where he teaches courses on globalization, international organization, and negotiation. He is also a senior advisor to migration and humanitarian policy of IOM and has tremendous experience at the global level and at the academic level in Bangladesh. Over to you, Professor Shahidul Haq.
Thank you very much, distinguished chair and dear panelists. Good afternoon. Today we, in this session, seeking to explore various dimensions of climate change through the lenses of inequality and justice. So looking at the program, I thought that I will look at the dimension of forcibly displaced people under the climate change, which is often known as climate migration. I'll be interchangeably using the word concept, environmental migration and climate migration. What I'll do, given that the audience is very educated, and I'm sure that you are familiar with the concepts, so I will straightway hit as to how I frame this in the context of injustice, justice and inequalities. It's it's a two different thing in terms of population displacement. So, and then I will also share with you as to how the global debate has emerged, and currently the International Court of Justice is looking at climate change, which is a very exciting kind of a phenomena, which would be of more interest rather than going through as to what so far civilization has done to deal with people who are extremely vulnerable and get immediately ousted from their habitat due to climate change. Now, climate change and climate migration, these two debate has been parallelly going for quite some time till 2010, when these two community thought that there may be some nexus between the two, and that's the beginning of the climate change impacts on the climate migration. And now people think that the first impact that one has on the people is to not them to be able to live on their harm way and move out. So that's one. In the process, migration came out as one of the tools of adaptation to the climate change. Now, that is not without debate. I'll come back to that. And then we'll look at it. Now, I thought as to how I link inequalities to start with and climate migration. There are three ways that I could think of. One is that inequalities arising out of the very fact that climate impacts on people in a varying factor. Not that every people in the community get affected in the same manner. The people who are living on the margin of the society or in the Bay areas get more affected than those who of us live in a more structured habitat. So that's one. The other area is when the community is making a policy or a program to address this vulnerability aspect, the climate and inequality thing, the very participation of these people who are affected are often not there because the policies are made at the capital level. So that's the second level of inequality. And third is that when the program gets implemented, often their power and the rights are not respected. So these are the three ways that we can look through in terms of looking at the climate migration. Now, interestingly enough, the drafters of the program did not use the word injustice. They have used the word justice, which has helped me also to bring on the positive aspects of climate migration. There are three ways we can look at the impact of migration mobility in the context of climate change through the lenses of justice. One is that if you really allow people to move out of their harm ways, you actually help them in their well-being and help them in sustaining their life and livelihood. Now, there's a very interesting study came out of the Department of Science of UK back in 2011, which actually for the first time brought the whole issue of climate change and migration together. I will not go into that. There they have said that, if people are not allowed or not able to move out of the harm way of the climate impact, they get trapped. So that's how the concept of trapped population has come in, which is actually the issue of inequality and injustice. I will not go into the elaboration of that. There's a whole cell debate on that, which is still emerging. But there are two concerns if you want to use migration as an adaptive tool for climate-induced displacement. One is that people think that this is how the people who have committed the crime get away. So that's the first. Second is, actually you are pushing the very victim to take on the burden rather than the state and the society. So that's the two critics. Despite the fact there are some issues that, that goes on. I know I'm running against time. So I'll go directly into how the global debate has emerged, centering around climate migration, inequalities, and justice. As I said, before 2010, there wasn't much debate linking the two, climate change and migration. In fact, I remember, because I was then working for the UN system, we were pushed around by both the climate debaters and the migration debaters, saying that, you do not belong to this particular area. So we were in between till 2010, when for the Cancun summit came around, and famously adopted the 14F para, where recognized that people do get displaced, and that need to be addressed not only through migration program, but also through climate programs, where the whole idea of relocation came in, and in the Pacific, these are big issues. So that's the beginning, but that was not the end of it. And then eventually, these two communities came around. Also, the UN system immediately geared up and created various kinds of initiatives. I'll not go into the Nansen initiative, which is done by the Norway, which has now platform for disaster displacement, where these issues, that how you can save climate migrants and move them out of their harm way. So that's one. But as I said, that I will end with an interesting debate that currently taking place. But before that, let me just touch that the climate migration evolved through relocation debate within the UNFCCC debate. But that was not moving. It's about what, 10 to 14 years? Not much, except Pacific, where it has been implemented in various ways. Then a whole relocation. If people are on the harm way of climate impact, you move them away from somewhere else. We are currently doing a study from the North-South University. We are doing a study in the North-South University, which we studied 10 years back when I was Foreign Secretary. In the, we had a cyclone, category 1, Aila. Aila displaced huge population in the Bay of Bangladesh. And those people continue to sort of get displaced. They were taken away, but they have come back. And we are doing currently the study that what happened in the last 10 years in their life in terms of relocation and the migration. So that's one. But the current debate from 2019 onwards is that climate migrants should also be able to access to the loss and damage fund. So that's an interesting justice angle that comes into the debate. Can I have 1 minute more, sir? Yes. Yeah, because I haven't come into the International Court of Justice, which I think will be more interesting. So, loss and damage fund is also looking at climate change for the first time. So, hopefully, some new normative structures will emerge where you are, if you are displaced due to climate change, you can also ask individually and collectively from the fund. So, that's one very positive thing. The thing has happened in 2019. In Vanuatu, some of the students for the first time started raising voice that, what is this climate change? What is the harm of climate change? How do you define it legally? And then, who is accountable for it? These were the questions eventually ended up in Geneva and New York. And UNGA adopted a resolution that there has to be an advisory opinion of International Court of Justice on the harm caused due to climate change, who is accountable, and how it could be addressed. Very interesting. For the first time, developed country was very nervous. So, finally, the International Court of Justice, which is located in Netherlands, Hague, has finished hearing about 93 countries, including Bangladesh, which made a big submission on the whole issue. Hopefully, middle of next year, there will be an advisory. That advisory will radically change the idea of climate migration and climate change in the context of justice and inequality. Thank you.
and its implications for inequality, or how inequality often drives climate migration. Very thank you for that excellent presentation. Now, I would request Saima Williams to make the presentation. Saima leads the work on climate resilience and climate finance, etc. at Center for CPDI, and she has more than 15 years of experience in the advocacy, capacity development, and her focus include climate action, disaster risk reduction, climate resilience, etc. Over to you, Saima.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Sorti. Thank you, organizers of SAES, for having me. I'm very grateful to all of you. So I would like to start with, disproportionate effects marginalized communities face. But I would like to especially shed light on the unique perspective of Pakistan, where the marginalized communities of, women, girls, minorities, and transgenders, sometimes they face a unique set of vulnerabilities. So I would like to talk about the Pakistan's perspective. Due to Pakistan's Islamic cultural norms, the women face some unique set of vulnerabilities. For instance, in flood 2022, many women lost their lives because they tried to wear abaya before evacuation. And many women refused to be rescued by male responders, and that actually got the reason of the increased number of women mortality rate during evacuation and disaster. In rescue camps, flood 2022, there were increased number of sexual violence and rape cases of women and girls, children. So in a patriarchal society like Pakistan, where the women are considered the symbol of honor, so the male members of the family, they decide to marry them off for their so-called safety and security purpose. So there were two type of scenarios that came to surface. In one, where due to the increased number of rape cases, they decided to marry their minor girls. They decided to marry them off. Their education got ceased, and they were the victim of the early marriage. And there is also a practice of, the selling minor girls into marriage to older people. This is also a practice in some areas of Pakistan, and this practice is due to the poverty. So during disaster, this practice also becomes more visible. Because the poverty rate increases and people start selling their minor girls because they think that it is not safe to keep them in the rescue camps. And also due to poverty, this number got increased, selling minor girls into marriage with the older people. So if we look at the impact of climate change in the lives of those girls' children, so we can see that this impact is for lifetime. Their education got ceased. They were married off prematurely. Impact of climate change actually varies from society to society. Customary practices and the cultural norms that actually add up to the impact of the climate crisis in any society. In Pakistan, where the education rate of girls is already very low, it has been seen that post-disaster, fewer number of girls return to schools if we compare with the boys. So this is a scenario. And also, in a patriarchal society, women are often the ones who are responsible for providing food for the entire family. They are responsible for cooking food and serving the food to the entire family. And sacrificially, sometimes they keep less food for themselves and for their daughters as well. So in those rescue camps, when they are short of food, mostly for girls and for women, this small food portion, sometimes that gets more, decreased. So these are type of the impacts we see for women during climate disasters. But when it comes to transgender community, the situation is more scary. Because this is the community that is often, looked down. They are severely stigmatized, and they are discriminated to the point of hatred. So, in the evacuation process, there are instances when they are refused to be rescued, because in our society, people even don't like to touch them. And the male responders are also from the same society. So there are examples when the transgenders will refuse to be evacuated. Even in the relief process, even if it is a public relief process by the government or from the INGOs or the civil society, there is a system in relief that is called family number. So the relief packages are given as per the family number. And in transgender community in Pakistan, I don't know about the rest of the South Asian countries, in Pakistan there is no family system in transgenders. So of course they don't have any family number, so they are totally excluded from the relief system. And if they are injured, there are also no separate facilities for the transgenders in the hospitals. So again, a debate triggers if they get injured during the disaster, that where to place them, in female wards or in male wards. Because there is no separate wards for them. And even if we try to place them in the female ward or in the male ward, the people in the ward, they also start objecting on their presence. That why have you placed them in our ward? So this is the type of discrimination and hatred, and how the impact of climate impact actually multiplies for these communities. And the same goes for the religious minorities. Actually, the discrimination for these marginalized groups or stigma is always there. Is it working? Okay. Okay, so, this discrimination and these discriminatory emotions are always there, but they just become more visible in the face of any climate shocks. They came to surface. To wrap up this part of my talk, I would like to come up with some of the policy suggestions. I suggest that there should be trained female workers in the rescue team to address the cultural sensitivities as well, and then the medical and paramedical staff should be trained to handle diverse, gender identities, and there should be separate facilities in the hospitals as well. And after disaster, there should be a full-fledged program to re-enroll girls students to schools. And often I think we will have to condition it with the cash transfer tied to education. Then of course, then it will work. And then, coming from this type of deeply penetrated in examples of injustices in our society, I would like to talk about the issue of climate justice. Often when we talk about the issue of climate justice, we think it is a global issue. But I would rather call it a very much local and national issue. For instance, if we talk about the Pakistan, while Pakistan's per capita emissions are very low as compared to global scale. But there is a stark disparity within Pakistan. The urban elites living in large cities with energy-intensive lifestyles, with luxury products and with luxury imports. This segment actually, mirrors the urban, global north, disproportionately impacting the Pakistan's overall carbon footprint. And I think the same goes for the rest of the South Asian countries as well. While the rural communities and the urban poor and the people living in illegal settlements, slum communities, they represent the global South, who are more impacted by the climate change, while they are, very least contributor to it. So, while we plead our case of climate justice on global forums, I think we should champion these principles internally as well. We need to come up with the progressive carbon taxes on the luxury products, on luxury vehicles, luxury imports, and energy intensive products. There should be educational campaigns for the urban elites as well, and there should be targeted, robust policy and advocacy to ensure the urban poor are not left behind in our efforts of climate action. I'm coming towards the end of my talk. So I just want to talk about the loss and damage fund has been made operational after many years, but still I think whether we talk about the loss and damage fund or we talk about the NCQG, which is aiming 1.3 trillion per year till 2035. Still, I think the both funds are at pledges stage. And so with funds or without funds, South Asia needs to come up, beyond that. I think we need to make parallel efforts while pleading our case at the global level for loss and damage fund. We need to, keep continuing our efforts for internally for mitigation and adaptation measures. And if you talk about the loss and damage or NCQG funds, this process is so much complicated, and sometimes they require so much unrealistic data that it actually, they made the fund impossible to be accessible by the most vulnerable during the difficult times. So I would like to sum up with saying this: while they want to maintain a high standard of operationalization of those funds, they want to keep high standards of reporting and data collection, everything. I think we need to keep balance. They need to keep balance between maintaining high standards and the provision of those funds which are specifically for the vulnerables. So accessibility of those funds to vulnerable during the most difficult times. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Saima. Saima has brought in two important key insights. Causes of climate change could be global, but the consequences are often national and local. And there is the whole issue of how gender inequality and gender injustice actually further get exacerbated during disasters, and how it affects the development goals in terms of girl children's education and rights, etc. So thank you very much for the excellent presentation. The last presentation is by Diksha Singh. Diksha worked with Swati. She currently serves as the program coordinator of Swati, where she leads research, advocacy and capacity building initiative. For her tenure, Swati, Diksha has advanced policy dialogue on trade, private sector, finance, agriculture and climate change. Over to you, Diksha.
Thank you, Chair. So, as Prakash's presentation touched upon that, how globalization and consumption is also highly responsible for worsening climate change scenario, and obviously international trade is one of the biggest culprits when it comes to emission. So anyway, despite the fear of sounding like devil's advocate, I would like to touch upon how trade and trade policies could be leveraged for adaptation and mitigation measures, and how trade could facilitate the transition into low carbon economy while creating income and employment opportunities for the most vulnerable people. So a lot of my ideas is drawn upon from a recent study Southie did on trade and climate nexus, in which we looked into how climate change is affecting Nepal's trade structure and how we can take advantage of how Nepal could take advantage in terms of trade in this changing scenario. So obviously, we all know trade impacts climate change because production and transportation related to cross-international trade is one of the biggest emission generators, but at the same time, climate change also affects trade. So obviously, through disasters, how climate-induced disasters affect production and trade-related infrastructures, that is one area. Besides that, also, climate change is shuffling and shifting comparative advantages of the countries, especially when it comes to agricultural products. We see that because of the warming that's happening, some of the areas that were not viable for certain crops, now suddenly they are producing those kind of crops. I think in Nepal we can see that in oranges and some fruits. Something similar has emerged, and also because of the climate change and how mitigation technology is being developed, certain technology has become lucrative, and also especially energy resources, renewable energy resources such as hydropower generated electricity and other electricity generated through renewable resources have become a lucrative tradable commodities. So that is one of the how trade is being changed. Climate change is affecting trade, and so when we talk about trade and exports, we can see that environmental goods and environmental preferable goods are now emerging. So in Nepal, Nepal could take advantage of that if we, countries like Nepal. So when we talk about Nepal, Nepal's major exportable agricultural products such as tea, cardamom, etc., and also not agricultural products, but products that Nepal exports such as jute products, and those products, they tick all the right boxes when we talk about when you talk about environmentally preferable goods. And so, but having said that, I also want to add that just because demand for certain goods has increased does not mean that any country will be in the capacity to increase supply accordingly, because there's already supply side constraints need to be addressed. And also all these products that I mentioned, they are also highly vulnerable to impact of climate change. So there is that, and also I think we also discussed that yesterday and today also, that a lot of regulations are being implemented when it comes to green the supply chains. So now that there's a fear that for smaller countries and for smaller producers, cost of compliance and meeting standards, and also cost of receiving those certifications is going to be quite expensive, and that is especially huge that could emerge as a new non-tariff barrier, and also one of the sticking factor for the smaller producers that are involved in this producing these items. And also not only through exports, and imports are also quite equally important when it comes to managing climate change. So because imports give access to low carbon technology and others, and especially when it comes to agriculture and food security, number one, imports are quite important, because in terms of food security, that not all the countries are capable of producing all their food security related needs. So easy import is quite crucial. And at the same time, now that climate change has become evident, and there are responses to climate change. There's lots of research and development being done in terms of developing this heat-resistant seeds and all kinds of drought-resistant seeds and all those kind of technologies also. And so trade can give access to countries that are not that well developed in research and development to those technologies. And also, so this, even in this term, in this area also, one of the important aspects, crucial barrier could be international property rights regime that governs trade also. So those factors, if those factors are not taken into account, the development in technology and import may not be that beneficial to everyone. So, and also when we talk about energy trade, then obviously clean energy and renewable energy has emerged as one important commodity, because being from Nepal, we can see that we talk a lot about how we can create prosperity through exporting hydropower to the neighboring country. But so in terms of that, in last session we had on clean energy, one of our eminent panelists, he pointed out that just because there is a demand does not mean that there is a market. So to create a conducive market, a lot of regulatory and as well as a lot of geopolitics is involved. So if we do not take those things into account, just because there is demand does not mean the market. So we also need to, need all these things taken into account. So my last point would be, I think I want to draw upon yesterday's plenary session in which green value chain, greening of value chain was discussed, and even when we consider greening of supply chain, so it is important that it is going to be expensive and there will be a cost involved. And the question was, who is going to pay? And Professor Rehman Soman rightly pointed out that when such situations arise, it is the most squeezed is going to be laborers. So when we talk about climate financing, this aspect should also be taken into account. Like how does financing these transition into technology, even transitioning our normal value chain into green value chain is going to how it won't affect the most vulnerable. So that we don't end up replacing one kind of monopoly with just another. So thank you.
Thank you, Diksha. Thank you very much for those excellent presentations. So now we will get into the open session. If there is any specific questions to address, actually we have 5 excellent presentations. Prakash Kafle focused on the larger issues of how inequality and injustice perpetuates and how climate change has actually exacerbated these inequalities in multiple ways. Then we have Dr. Nanda speaking about how economic development and energy consumptions are connected. And it's a dichotomy in terms of he said about how developing countries and the developed countries, and this, inequality of energy consumption is something which we need to do that. Professor Shahidul Haq gave a very, very insightful presentation on how inequality, marginalization, etc. also induce climate migration, and climate migration also location specific in terms of island nations. They will be, submerged. So that also, and he also said, some advantages of climate migration for the lives, saving lives of the people. Then we had a very good presentation by Saima, bringing the whole issue of gender justice and how gender inequality and gender injustice perpetuate, or get exacerbated during the disasters. And she has very clearly shown how cultural norms, how in a patriarchal setting, women are at the receiving end, both in terms of their food, in terms of their education, in terms of their agency, and in terms of minor, women getting married. All those issues, she also has come out with excellent suggestions. And Diksha very well connected how international trade in the times of inequality, in terms of agriculture, in terms of, she said about the supply chain, particularly the small producers, within the trade dynamics, how this has a huge implications both from the supply side and the demand side. So thank you very much for those excellent presentations. Now the floor is open for any questions, or comment, whatever it is, it will be for 1 minute. So sometimes, so 1 minute, say your name, and if you have a specific questions to a panelist, please tell, the name of the panelist, or if it's a general questions, please say so. Mic is not on.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Myself, Dr. Roshan Yadav, Advisor, Ministry of Forest and Environment, Government of Nepal. I have a question with Professor Nityanand. My question is that, sir, you talked about the very recently Baku, and where we had a very disappointing results connected to, in case of climate finance and all. What we saw in Baku that none of the big leaders from, we say, the very recently elected President Donald Trump, neither from India, Prime Minister Modi, not if we work very closely with the government of India in several aspects, not even the Forest and Environment Minister was there. There were just 2 or 3 joint secretaries were there, and so was with the China. All the big countries were in. So if these big countries are not taking this seriously, then how are we going to resolve it? And in case of Nepal, very recently, with a decade, we are supplying our exporting our hydropower to India only. But now we have been doing it to Bangladesh, and the talk is going on with other countries as well. So how we are going to resolve it? Thank you.
Thank you. And others, we will take 2-3 questions. Yeah. Shafkat Munir.
Thank you, John. I think when we have this...
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Shafkat Munir. I am from Pakistan, SDPI. See, when we have this discourse of climate change, climate justice, and inequality, so whatever I have understood because of the negotiation we are following so far for years and years, this seems to be an issue of haves and have-nots. I think, the very debate of climate justice and climate change and whatever we are getting is turning into a new struggle, which I think is a class struggle. Because, those who are responsible to pay, they are not paying it. Those who need it, they are not getting it. So that's why I think if we will be discussing inequality just in isolation in context of climate change debate, we will not be on the right path if we will not look at with the angle of the class.
So there is a comment.
There's a comment.
He said, yeah, it's between haves and have-not. Yeah,
Mustafizur Rahman, Center for Policy Dialogue. I would like to request Mr. Shahidul Haq to elaborate on the last point that you wanted to say, but couldn't finish, in fact, because of the paucity of time with regard to the climate justice and the international justice system that you wanted, that there is an attempt to establish an interface between the two.
Thank you. One more. Yeah, please give the mic and introduce yourself.
Namaskar. My name is Tika Dahal. I am chairperson of Nepal Disabled Women Association. My question is related to, I think, Prakash sir. the issues of climate justice and equity. People living in the high risk area play an important role in the protecting the environment, but face many challenges. Their lack of accessibility, lack of information, and they make it hard for the dealing, how to fight the this climate injustice, you know. So how can we ensure the rights of them as the perspective of climate justice, especially the marginalized group? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last question.
Thank you very much. My name is Aman Pant, and I am representing Nepal Economic Forum here. Thank you so much, Ms. Simon Williams, on the crucial insight on how culture ties to climate injustice with examples from Pakistan. I'd also like to touch upon the point you mentioned about how the climate emission and vulnerabilities are disproportionate not only at a global level but also within nation states and within countries, especially in South Asia, with the urban rich consuming and emitting at levels equivalent to the global north. My question surrounds this issue that unless we really address this disproportionate emission to vulnerability issue at the national level, can we really have a strong leverage on the international stage when it comes to climate finance or claims for loss and reparations? I think this is often overlooked within discourses, and hopefully we can discuss more on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will come to, some of them are comments, some of them were questions specifically. So in the context of this, probably we can, I would raise a couple of other issues. One is, when you talk about inequality, inequality is a multi-dimensional concept. So there is inequality between countries, right? Both in terms of wealth, in terms of geopolitical power, in terms of colonial history. So there is inequality between countries. Then there is inequality within the countries. As we said, there is a north in the south and there is a south in the north. So in the urban areas where the wealth is concentrated, the facilities are concentrated, water resources are concentrated, and the rural people are at the receiving end. That's one thing. And the other dimension is the social inequality. We have not talked about. When you talk about South Asia, the caste discrimination is a very important thing. And caste, applies in different contexts. In India, it is very much there. Social inequality. Most of the people happen to be Dalits and Adivasis, poor people. In Bangladesh, in many times, it could be marginalized communities, right? In Pakistan, in Nepal, everywhere. There are marginalized communities, social inequalities, and the third dimension is very well sort of gender inequality, where also she has really raised the issue of what you call transgender, LGBTQ. How does it affect them? So I think the discourse will have to be to do with what you call micro inequalities within the countries, within the communities. Like in many communities, people don't have access to water because the Dalits cannot access water from the same well. So there are micro level inequalities which is happen, including the patriarchy at the home, and then there are macro level inequalities, which is largely to do with the geopolitical, and economic, political economy framework. So I would also request everybody to take 1 to 2 minutes to specifically reflect upon some of these points which have come. We will start from Saima, women first, and Diksha, and then we will come to the other side, to Professor, Dr. Nanda, and Sushil.
Thank you. So responding to your question, of course, this is the same take which I have, that when we talk about the global climate justice, it's not about the global issue, it's a very much local and national issue. If we talk about the lifestyle of rural and the urban poor who are most exposed to climate change, I think if you look at their lifestyles are the most eco-friendly lifestyles. They reuse their products, I think the most, they don't waste food, and they don't spend money on the unnecessary luxury products, or they don't overconsume. But climate justice does not only depend on the societal norms or on the economic class. It also depends on the level of I must say corruption and bad governance as well. The climate impacts varies from society to society, and it also varies from government to government. The same climate can have different impacts in one country and can have the totally different impacts in the other country, depending on the the quality of their governance. Even the same, I think the corruption and bad governance also impacts our mitigation and adaptation measures as well. We also keep on advocating for global funds, but what about the the previous funds which have already have been to our countries? So a lot of corruption cases and the bad governance have jeopardized their impacts. So I must say that the climate impacts not only varies. It not only depends on societal norms, it also depends on the quality of governance. And when we talk about the the climate justice, I think our arguments should not be the same. What we keep using at the global forums, okay, we are the least contributors and we are the most affected. This is the argument most used at the global forums, but when we come back to our home country, we keep using the the same arguments. I'm really fed up by listening this argument from the lay person that we are the least contributors and we are the most affected. So where is the personal responsibility? So I think our global arguments should be different from our, our country level arguments. Only then we can be able to, we can see a dream of resilient South Asia come true.
Thank you. Diksha?
Like Dr. Samuel pointed out that these impacts are not impacts are discriminatory, and it depends on how these inequities that people face in their everyday life based on their gender, class, caste, ethnicity, that pervades into their experiences as well. Like when a certain disaster happen, that though may first impact of disaster might be equally distributed among all, but how easily that person or that group can come out of disaster, it depends on the various other factors. Their resiliency is dependent on different factors, such as how much their economic status, social status, and as Saima just pointed out during her deliberation, that their gender identity, how much it's so, because transgender people, when they face a disaster, it is not what disaster impact was fatal, but the lack of support for them was fatal. So I'm again coming back to trade and economic angle in this also. So when climate change impacts, when we talk, for example, let's say when you talk about agricultural products and production, climate change impacts all of the farms in the same area equally, in the same manner. But whether this particular farmer has the capacity to withstand that impact, like if drought happens, and whether that farmer is able to withstand that loss of that crop and again come back easily to for another season, that depends on whether that a lot of it depends on if that farmer has financial capacity to withstand that, and also whether the farmer has, maybe the farmer may not have enough savings, but if there is a support system available from the government or from the local communities, if they so that also matters. So resilience, when we talk about just impact, discriminatory impact, it is built upon the resilience. And resilience, I feel, not only I feel, resilience is output of various variables, and we need a lot of more work can be done in terms of that, without like policy support and how the that support is delivered. That is my take.
Thank you.
So, and I think if we can talk about this in another session. This session immediately after that talks about resilience. So.
Thank you, thank you. And Professor Shahidul Haq, there are some specific questions to you, and you couldn't finish the last point.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Professor Mustafizur Rahman, for raising these questions. As you know, that climate change debate has been very controversial, very sensitive. It was north-south, industrial versus non-industrial issues. So, days after days, years after year, there has been a debate going on, and on the centering around the CBDR. It was primarily a blame game, and at the end, most of the negotiation was falling flat. Absolutely, it's a class struggle. It's worse than that. I think class struggle had little more hope than the negotiation that was in the climate change. And I'll not go into that, but here you could see what role power normally plays in a negotiations. In the multilateral setting, this is the worst case where you will see power being literally exercised on smaller powers. Literally, hand twisting. So that's one. So when some of the countries which were suffering from the climate disasters, they said, what is the hell? Let's do something. And it's all started in 2019 in Vanuatu. Couple of students stood up, like Bangladesh, and said that, enough is enough. Let's take the whole issue to a legal recourse. And, there is a world court called International Court of Justice, based in Hague. They said, let's go there. But there was a lot of hurdles. Vanuatu could not actually file a case. As a state, you have to file a case. So what they did, they went to the UNGA, where the less powerful have little more voice and space in terms of dialogue. So there was a long debate from 2019 to 2022, when after a lot of debate, lot of power play, eventually UNGA could pass a resolution saying that there has to be some advisory opinion by the International Court of Justice on three things. One is what is the harm in climate change? What is the legal definition of that? Because most of the cases, especially against the international corporations, you cannot win because there is no legally recognized definition of harm due to climate change, even the industrial harm. Bhopal for that matter. So that's one. And said, we're not going to stop there. We're going to also ask, the resolution suggested, that who is accountable for this and how the system could recourse. Now, the countries and international organizations were asked to submit their submissions, where Bangladesh also made a submission on the climate change. So there were 93 submissions, not only by the states, but also by the international organizations. And I think yesterday, the final submissions were made, oral presentation was done. This is a very typical legal system. Now the judges will sit down and we'll have an advisory opinion. Now, there is also a debate already raising that, advisory opinion which will not be mandatory on the states and international organizations or industrial establishments to go by it. But what it will do, it will first, for the first time will define what is the climate harm, how it happens, who is accountable. The whole issue of CBDR. CBDR was a basically political tool developed by the developing South as an argument. It was a political statement. It was not a legal statement. It could not be taken to a court. Hopefully, this time, whatever comes out of it, the court will be able to take it to the, recognize, even in Bangladesh, suppose a Bangladesh family says that, because of this establishment, a particular company, I have been harmed, which is because of the climate change that has caused because of that industry. Then you take it to the court and court will have to recognize the definition. They will have to fit in the recognition and then compensation issues will come. So this will again linked up with the whole issue of loss and damage funds. So hopefully there's a lot of hope, but at the end, as you rightly say, it's a class struggle and where powerless always gets out of the scene.
Thank you.
Let's see.
Thank you. Dr. Nanda.
Thank you. My friend from Nepal, what Mr. Modi says or does, I cannot say anything on that because I am not in part of government. So anyway, but despite rhetoric, whatever we have, India remains a poor country. It doesn't matter that we have put something in the moon, or it doesn't matter whether we have atomic power. But the fact remains that we are not a rich country. And on many situations that the regional other countries, they have expectation because it's a big country, but it's not a rich country. Within India, the individual states, they have their expectation and find it difficult to manage that. And it's not just developing. When within India, we talk about resource transfer from relatively richer states to poorer states, we find a lot of problems. It's not so easy. You talked about urban divide, urban-rural divide. It's there, but inequality is a very complicated concept. If I give my one very personal example, when I started my job in Delhi, people back home would ask me, what is your salary? I would say 6,000. They said, okay, you are earning much more. I am earning only about 7,000, 8,000. I would say actually my salary is much less because I pay 3,000 as rent and you stay in your own home. So if you look at only at income, you might get into wrong conclusion. When we started economics, we were taught something about free goods. And since I grew up in homes, in rural areas, I knew a lot of free goods. Even fish can be free goods. A lot of vegetables, fruits are free goods for me. And I live in Delhi, imagine even air is not free good for me because I have to install an air purifier at home. So that's where, the urban-rural divide is not so easy to understand. Now, given that it is difficult for, come to common platform, and other regional countries might have complained, but India is also not in a position to address all that to the satisfaction of neighboring countries. But as far as electricity is concerned, I understand there is no such problem as of now. It took time, in this part of the world, everything moves so slowly. So as of now, there is no hurdle in Nepal selling electricity to Bangladesh. More importantly, we have Indian market, which is very well developed, mature market, where our independent power producers, our DISCOMs, our transmission companies, they all are trading, on a platform. Now that market is actually open to all other South Asian countries also, not Pakistan, but all other South Asian countries. But what matters for that is about, in that market is Bhutan and Bangladesh and Nepal, because Sri Lanka cannot access that as of now. Now, in that market, you can sell, you can buy, but selling electricity is not about selling vegetables. So there are certain protocols, because maintaining grids, I'm not an engineer, but what I hear from others is that maintaining grid stability is very, very important and difficult. If you add more than what you are designed to add, or if you draw more what you are designed to draw, the entire grid can collapse. So obviously there are protocols, there are rules and regulations. Yeah. Now, as of now, there is nothing called regional rules which need to be developed for future, and I would always support that. But as of now, in the absence of any regional rules, India said, as long as you, conform to our protocols and rules, you can sell and buy electricity in Indian market.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. 1 minute, Prakash. Any point which you wanted to highlight? Because time is up. Yeah. Prakash.
John, I do not have very much to add, but I do agree with my Pakistani friends that with respect to inequality, though economic inequality it has a great importance in contributing overall inequality, but we have certain other dimensions like social inclusion, gender, locations. So these all things contribute inequality, and I do agree that this is a very complex idea or a very evolving idea with respect to inequality. And this is the one point. Then and then we have to very inclusive in addressing these variables: economic, social, caste, locational. These all things. And I also do agree with my friends that addressing inequality locally should form the basis for our further work on the inequality. Though, because this is so a complex thing, so intermingled to each other, this is quite challenging. It does not happen overnight. It takes time, but we all have to agree and acknowledge that this is the paramount importance things that lead to several other social problems, including climate crisis. So this is my argument in the presentation. And the next thing is this with respect to including marginalized, socially excluded group, including people with disability. The only solution is to include them in the policy deliberation, is to co-create the solution with them. So this is the only solution I would see, is to provide a conducive environment where people can participate, can express their views, or there will be no any backlash on them when they express their views. So these are some of the things that we can make this climate change very inclusive. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Now I have only 1 minute to sum up, but let me pick up 2 or 3 big issues which have come. One is the whole issue of power, because towards the end of the day, inequality and injustice is about dominant power relationship in the society. And that dominant power relationship has, within the society, patriarchy. And we have to say it, patriarchy. And the second thing is the political economy. Who controls the resources? That's the political economy. Who controls the land? Who controls the habitat? Who controls the technology? And who controls the finance? These 4 issues, unless it is addressed. And now, let's look at the fact, like Dr. Nanda said, it's not really India. The largest number of poor people and hungry people live in South Asia. And who are the poor people and hungry people? They have been socially and historically marginalized people. In our country, still it's Dalits and Adivasis, right? And even look at urban poor. And I remember working with urban poor in the 1990s and 80s. All of them were victims of development. They were displaced by the big dams where they didn't get water. They didn't get water, but they lost the land and got some money, and they ended up in slums, right? Where they were working as drivers and cleaners of those well-off people. And the consumption of the 1% of the wealthiest person is 16% of the emissions. And that's equivalent to 66% of the people globally. And this has also other things. And I know in many places, in many houses, in many, there are lots of swimming pool when people do not have one bucket of water, where women will have to walk kilometers to fetch water. And that's the reality. And that reality has nothing to do with climate change. It has been historically, the inequality and injustice is based on the unequal and unjust distribution of resources. And resources means land, habitat, technology, financial resources, gainful employment, all of them. And unless we address this, and that's the point I wanted to make what Saima said. It's towards the end of the day, it's about the governance. He also said about it. The distribution of finances in India, I come from Kerala and, day for yesterday I submitted to the 16th, Finance Commission, and one of the things was disaster prone. And that's the point I wanted to say. The largest number of people died in South Asia because of disasters. Actually, it's not only cyclone, I'm doing some research, Bola cyclone killed more people than tsunami. And many people may not know in what happened in the 1970 in the Bay of Bengal. So the point about it is we are, disaster prone. And what our leaders are doing. And that's a very, governance issue is a fundamental thing. It's easy to point fingers elsewhere. Are we using our finances to decrease inequality? Are we doing progressive tax? Are we doing distribution of resources in an equitable way? These are the questions we need to ask because climate change exacerbates existing inequalities and injustice. It also creates new inequalities and injustice in terms of technology. For example, whether it is Tesla, the richest man in the world, who also controls X, and when you look at the media, social media is the most monopolized thing in the world, right? Whether it is Facebook, WhatsApp, whatever it is, what we see, what we read, they decide, and algorithm decide. So there is also technological inequality which restricts information to some and which actually privilege information to somebody. So the data is also a very important thing beyond the finance. Friends, we had an excellent presentation with the 5 very scholarly panelists giving excellent 5 different dimensions from energy consumption to climate migration to gender inequality to how trade plays a very important role in the time of climate change, and how climate change discourse also has something to do with our food security, agriculture, farming, etc., etc. And I would like to thank each and every panelist for the excellent insights and presentations. And I would like to thank all those participants who patiently listened to this dialogue. I hope these insights will contribute to the policy outcome of this very important South Asia Economic Summit. Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you, John. On behalf of Saudi and all the co-organizers, I would like to thank you, our moderator and panelist, and I would like to request them to please stand for a group photograph before exiting the stage.